Imagine it's 2037. You're standing in what used to be called Vancouver, now officially North Seattle Metro District 7. The Tim Hortons on the corner. It's a Dunkin'. The hospital where your daughter was born. Privatized, renamed, now charging $47,000 for a routine appendectomy. You pull out your wallet. No more loonies, no more toonies, just crisp American dollars with dead presidents staring back at you. Your house, the one your parents bought in 1995 for $280,000, just sold to a tech executive from Austin for $4.2 million in cash. Your property taxes tripled. But hey, at least the border crossing to Seattle is gone. You walk past what used to be the CBC building. It's an Amazon data center now. The red and white maple leaf flag that once flew above it, replaced with the stars and stripes. 53 stars now. They added 3 for Canada's amalgamated super provinces. But here's the thing that makes your head spin. The economic forecasts from 2025 said this merger would save Canada, that it would rescue the frozen north from its slow-motion demographic collapse, its productivity nightmare, its brain drain to the very country that just swallowed it whole. So, did it work? Welcome to the autopsy of a nation that no longer exists. Welcome to the economic crime scene of the century. Here's the impossible math that led to this moment. In 2024, Canada's GDP per capita had fallen to just 72% of America's, the widest gap since the 1980s. Productivity growth flatlined for a decade. Housing prices in Toronto and Vancouver had become so disconnected from local incomes that the ratio hit 13 to 1. The average Canadian needed to work 22 years, saving every penny just to afford the median home. Meanwhile, 300,000 Canadians were fleeing south. Not refugees, not the desperate, the best. Doctors, engineers, AI researchers, all chasing American salaries that were 30 to 50% higher for identical work. Canada wasn't just losing a brain drain, it was hemorrhaging its central nervous system. So when the American delegation arrived in Ottawa with the proposal, a full economic and political merger sold as the ultimate free trade agreement, the polling was terrifying. 53% of Canadians under 35 said yes. Absorb us, save us from ourselves. Today, we're doing an autopsy on the dream and the nightmare. We're examining 7 fatal wounds that led to the merger and the 7 new wounds the merger created. Because, spoiler alert, when a superpower rescues a smaller nation, the rescue usually benefits the rescuer. 1. The productivity tomb. Meet Daniel. He's 34, born in Mississauga, one of the smartest software engineers you'll ever meet. University of Waterloo, co-op at Google, masters from U of T. In 2024, he's making $95,000 CAD working for a Toronto fintech startup. His roommate from Waterloo, same grades, same skills, same graduation year, moved to Seattle. He makes $185,000 USD. After exchange rate, that's roughly $250,000 CAD for the same job, writing the same code, attending the same Zoom meetings. Daniel does the math every single night. He knows the productivity gap isn't his fault. Canadian companies simply invest less in technology, less in equipment, less in training. Business investment per worker in Canada sat at 60% of American levels. 60%. That means Daniel is showing up to a productivity night fight with a plastic spoon. The mechanism is brutally simple. Canadian companies face a smaller domestic market, weaker venture capital ecosystems, and a regulatory environment that rewards incumbents over innovators. The Big 5 banks control 90% of banking. 3 giant telecoms control 90% of wireless. Competition? What competition? Why innovate when you can harvest fees from a captive population? Compare this to Singapore, a nation with fewer people than the Greater Toronto Area, which built a productivity machine through aggressive automation incentives and sovereign wealth investment. Canada built another condo tower in downtown Toronto. That productivity gap translated to roughly $18,000 in annual lost income for the average Canadian worker. Not theoretical money, real money that could have paid for a mortgage or retirement savings. So when America came knocking, whispering about integrated labor markets and harmonized wages, Daniel voted yes. Merge us. Just close the gap. But here's what Daniel didn't understand. Productivity doesn't teleport across borders. The merger didn't make Canadian companies suddenly invest more. It made them irrelevant. American firms simply expanded north, absorbed the best talent, and let the rest wither. The productivity gap closed, but only because Canadian productivity stopped being measured at all. 2. The housing tumor. Now meet the Nguyen's. Min and Lin, both 31, both working full-time professional jobs in Toronto. Combined household income 165,000 CAD. By any historical standard, they should be upper middle class. They should own a home with a yard. Instead, they rent a 600-square-foot condo for $3,200 a month in a building that smells faintly of regret. They've been saving for a down payment for 6 years. Every year, the goalposts move. The average detached home in the GTA costs $1.4 million. The math isn't just broken, it's actively mocking them. Canada built the most distorted housing market in the developed world through a perfect storm of policy failure. Zoning laws that made density illegal in most urban neighborhoods, immigration targets that added 500,000 people annually without building matching housing, tax policies that treated homes as investment vehicles rather than shelter, and a political class that owned multiple properties and had zero incentive to let prices fall. The result, housing market misery that dispersed Canada's best. When America looked at this tumor, it saw opportunity. Within 18 months of full integration, 40% of Canada's rental stock was owned by American real estate investment trusts. Rents didn't stabilize, they harmonized, upward towards American coastal city levels. The Nguyen's finally bought a home in Sudbury, 3 hours north. Min commutes to Toronto twice a week, sleeping in his car on Tuesdays. The boomers cashed out to Arizona, the millennials stayed trapped. Intergenerational wealth transfer, American style, accelerated, financialized, and utterly ruthless. 3. The healthcare autopsy. Here's where the merger drew blood, literally. Meet Eleanor. She's 67, retired teacher from Calgary, and she's been waiting 14 months for a knee replacement. In the old Canada, this was frustrating, painful, but normal. The universal healthcare system was underfunded, understaffed, and overwhelmed, but it was hers. No bills, no bankruptcy, no GoFundMe campaigns to afford chemotherapy. After the merger, Canada's provinces were given a choice: maintain the single-payer system with reduced federal transfers, or integrate with the American model and receive infrastructure investment funds. 7 of 10 provinces, desperate for cash after years of COVID debt, chose integration. Within 5 years, Eleanor faces a different calculation. She can wait 14 months in the public queue, now staffed by even fewer doctors since 60% of Canadian physicians migrated to American cities where they earn triple the income. Or she can pay $42,000 out of pocket for immediate surgery at the Cleveland Clinic franchise in Calgary. The mechanism was predictable. A two-tiered system doesn't reduce wait times in the public tier, it drains resources from it. Every nurse who moves to the private clinic is a nurse no longer staffing the public ER. Average out-of-pocket healthcare spending for Canadians rose from $900 per year to $4,100 per year within a decade of integration. Medical debt became the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the former provinces. The merger promised access to world-class American healthcare. What it delivered was access to world-class American bills.
4. The Resource Extraction Accelerator. You want to understand what America really bought when it bought Canada? Forget the hockey teams. Forget the maple syrup. Forget the politeness. America bought water. America bought oil. America bought rare earth minerals. America bought 9% of the world's renewable freshwater supply and the third largest proven oil reserves on Earth. Meet Caleb. He's a 28-year-old rig worker in Fort McMurray, Alberta, now officially North Texas Energy District. Before the merger, Caleb made good money extracting bitumen from the oil sands, $110,000 a year with a high school education. After the merger, American energy companies arrived with something the Canadian industry never had: scale, capital, and political backing from Washington. Within 3 years, extraction volume doubled. Caleb's salary rose to $135,000. New pipelines, previously blocked by environmental reviews and indigenous rights challenges, were approved in 90 days under national security provisions. But the environmental regulations that once slowed extraction weren't bureaucratic obstacles. They were the thin green line between profitable exploitation and irreversible ecological collapse. The caribou herds that once migrated through northern Alberta, gone. The boreal forest that acted as one of Earth's largest carbon sinks, cleared at triple the pre-merger rate. When a smaller jurisdiction with higher standards merges with a larger jurisdiction with lower standards, the standards don't average out, they collapse to the lower level. Post-merger, Canada's former provinces extracted $890 billion worth of oil, gas, and minerals in a decade. The royalty revenue captured by local governments, $47 billion. The rest flowed south. Norway captured 78% of its oil value through a sovereign wealth fund. Canada's oil wealth went to shareholders in Houston. 5. The brain drain reversal that wasn't. The great promise of the merger was simple. If Canadians keep leaving for America anyway, why not erase the border and let talent flow freely? The brain drain will become a brain circulation. Canadian cities will attract American talent too. My friend, you are about to learn why economists drink. Meet Priya. She's a 26-year-old AI researcher who grew up in Ottawa and got her PhD at MIT. Before the merger, she faced an impossible choice: stay in Canada making $120,000 at a university that couldn't afford serious compute power, or move to San Francisco making $400,000. Integrated labor markets, the politicians promised. American investment in Canadian research hubs. Here's what actually happened. American companies built satellite offices in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. They hired Canadian talent at Canadian prices. Why pay San Francisco salaries when you can pay Toronto salaries for the same workers in the same country? The wage gap didn't close. It became institutionalized. Toronto became America's discount knowledge worker district. Priya got a job at a major tech company in Toronto, making 60% of what her colleagues in Austin make. Same company, same Slack channels, same code reviews, vastly different paychecks. When she asked about relocation to headquarters, HR laughed. "Why would we move you? You're so cost-effective where you are." 10 years after the merger, the average Canadian-born worker in a Canadian city earned 58 cents for every dollar earned by an American-born worker doing the same job in an American city. Before the merger, that figure was 72 cents. The gap widened. Integration meant exploitation with better branding. 6. The cultural necrosis. Let's talk about something economists hate discussing: identity. Because when you sell a country, you don't just sell its GDP, you sell its stories. Meet Sophie. She's 8 years old, growing up in what used to be called Quebec, now officially Northeast Administrative Region 2. Her parents fought the merger desperately. Quebec held a referendum to reject integration. It lost 51 to 49. Sophie's kindergarten school curriculum has been harmonized with American standards. She learns American history, American civics, American exceptionalism. The Quiet Revolution? A footnote. The entire complex, painful, beautiful story of French survival in North America, reduced to a Heritage Month in March. Cultural homogenization is the invisible hand's favorite trick. When a larger economy absorbs a smaller one, the smaller culture doesn't blend, it dissolves. American content has larger production budgets because it serves a larger market. Canadian content can't compete. Without protective regulations, the kind the merger eliminated, the market optimizes, it standardizes, it kills diversity for efficiency. 10 years after the merger, French fluency among Canadian youth dropped from 29% to 11%. Indigenous language programs lost 70% of their funding. The CBC archives, containing 80 years of Canadian cultural production, were sold to a private equity firm that monetized the most popular content and deleted the rest. Sophie will grow up American. Something will be missing. A story, an identity, a way of seeing the world that was uniquely Canadian. No GDP figure will ever capture that loss. 7. The democratic dissolution. And finally, the wound that makes all other wounds permanent. Canada didn't just lose its economy, it lost its voice. Before the merger, Canada had 338 members of parliament representing 40 million people. After integration, the former provinces received 32 seats in the House of Representatives, 32 seats out of 467, 7% of the votes. Meet James. He's 45, a former municipal councillor in Halifax who dreamed of federal politics. His potential riding, a coastal Nova Scotia district with specific concerns about fishing rights and Atlantic climate change, was merged into a mega-district covering all of Atlantic Canada, one representative for 4 former provinces. When American oil companies wanted to expand offshore drilling into formerly protected Canadian waters, James organized resistance. He spoke at town halls. He built coalitions. He thought democracy would work. The drilling permits were approved in Washington by representatives who couldn't find Halifax on a map. Brexit was fundamentally about a population deciding that economic integration wasn't worth democratic subordination. Canadians, apparently, decided they'd rather be slightly less poor and voiceless. In the decade after the merger, the former Canadian provinces saw 0 of their priority legislation passed at the federal level. Healthcare Protection Act? Killed. Environmental sovereignty provisions? Vetoed. Bilingual federal services? Deemed administratively burdensome. 32 seats, 7%. That's the sound of 40 million people being told their vote doesn't matter. Why didn't Canada just fix its own problems? You summer sweet child, they tried. Productivity initiatives captured by incumbents who padded profits instead of investing. Housing funds blocked by homeowners who voted against densification. Healthcare reforms strangled by provincial fights and position lobbies. Every solution required first solving the problem it was meant to solve. The merger wasn't an American invasion, it was a Canadian surrender, signed by a population exhausted by decades of failed reforms and promised that someone else would finally fix things. So what happens next? Maybe by 2055, climate change makes northern territories valuable. Fresh water, arable land, temperate zones as America's South becomes uninhabitable. The 45 million people living in the former Canada now control 30% of North America's renewable fresh water. Suddenly, those 32 seats don't seem so powerless. A sovereignty coalition demands autonomy. Canadian culture gets a renaissance. Or maybe the young people leave. Why stay in Toronto making 58 cents on the dollar when Austin pays full dollar? Population drops from 45 million to 31 million. Median age hits 57. Schools close, stories die. Toronto becomes a museum. Experience Old Canada tours, showing visitors how people once lived with universal health care and a flag with a maple leaf. The question was never, can America save Canada? It was always, can Canada save itself?
And the answer, the brutal, honest answer, was no. Not because Canadians lacked talent or resources, but because systems benefited those with power and those people had no reason to change. Homeowners blocked housing, incumbents captured innovation funds, politicians promised change and delivered paralysis. The merger was a symptom, not a cause. The cause was decades of decisions made by people who would be dead before the consequences arrived, paid for by generations who never got to vote on them. Sound familiar? This isn't really a video about Canada. Economic collapse doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, then all at once, when small failures compound into systemic ones, when people with power choose comfort over change, again and again, until people without power lose faith in change entirely. So hit that subscribe button, not because it helps the algorithm, though it does, but because understanding how economies die is the first step toward making sure yours doesn't. Stay skeptical, stay angry, stay informed. And for the love of all that's economically rational, vote for politicians who don't already own 6 houses.